Hey there, this is Andrea Change from the Guild Literary Complex. The Guild Literary Complex is a performing literary arts organization that's been around since 1989, back in the days of the old Guild books on Lincoln Avenue. Tonight, I want to welcome you to Wandering the Body. I'm so happy to have these four really phenomenal female writers here representing their work this evening. I want to thank Q4 Productions, our video partner, for helping us host this event. I also want to thank the Delta virus for keeping us from having this event live. That's always a challenge right now, but I'm so happy to have these four ladies here. I want to introduce you to all four of these writers. First, Ananda Lima. Ananda Lima's poetry collection, Motherland, was the winner of the 2020 Hudson Prize and is forthcoming in 2021 with Black Lawrence Press. She's also the author of the chapbooks Vigil with Get Fresh Books, coming in 2021, it looks like. Tropicalia with Newfound. Wow, you're really prolific. There's like all these things that have come out in the last few years. I want to say her work has also appeared or is upcoming in the American Poetry Review, poets.org, Kenyon Review Online, Gulf Coast, The Common, Poet Lore, Poetry Northwest. She has served as the poetry judge for AWP Kurt Brown Prize and also staff as the Sewanee Writers Conference and mentor at the New York Foundation for the Arts Immigrant Artist Program. She has an MA in Linguistics from UCLA and an MFA in Creative Writing and Fiction from Rutgers. Her literary press partner, Joanna Novak, has a short story collection called Meaningful Work, won the 2020 Ronald, I can't say that name, Sukenik Innovative Fiction Contest and will be published by FC2 in 2021. Her third book of poetry, New Life, will be published by Black Lawrence Press in 2021, which is where we are now. Her debut memoir, Contradiction Days, will be published by Catapult in 2023. Novak is the author of the novel I Must Have You and two previous books of poetry, Noir Mania and Abeyance, North America. Her work has appeared in the Paris Review, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic. Her essay, My $1,000 Anxiety Attack, was anthologized in About Us, essays from the Disability series of the New York Times. She's co-founder of the literary journal and chapbook publisher, Tammy. Then there's my wonderful friend, Natanya Rosenfeld. Natanya Rosenfeld is a writer, independent scholar, and professor emerita of English from Knox College. She's just published her second book of poetry, The Blue Bed. Her first book of poetry, Wild Domestic, was published in 2015, and she's also published a critical book, Outsiders Together, Virginia and Leonard Woolf. She has essays, poems, and fictions that are forthcoming, but they've also appeared in journals like Yale Review, APR, Raritan, Gettysburg Review, Michigan Quarterly Review, Prairie Schooner, and Southwest Review. In 2018, she was named one of the 30 writers to watch by the Guild Literary Complex. She's also lived in Chicago since 2018. Roosevelt currently teaches literary courses for adults through the Newberry Library and the Graham School at the University of Chicago. And finally, our last reader this evening, or not last reader this evening, that'll be participating, Khalees Stewart is a writer and an educator, a Chicago native, West Side born and raised. Her writing has appeared in Quiddity, Meridians, Warpland, Hip Mama, On Becoming, Calyx, and other journals and publications. She's received artist fellowships from Edgebrook, where she was awarded the 2010 Adrienne Rainer Artstadt Award and the August Savage Gallery Arts International Residency Program. In 2017, Khalees established Westside Arts House, which is an amazing arts and cultural space on the west side of Chicago, selected as part of the Alliance of Artist Communities Emerging Program Institute. She is also the founder and artistic director for the Front Porch Arts Center, where her chosen work as a community artist and advocate for the cultural arts on the west side has taken root and continues to flourish. Small Altars is from Bronzeville Press. That's her most recent book of poetry. She's a previous collection called Womanish Poems from 2007. She lives in Austin, dedicated to the West Side with her two sons. So these four ladies are here tonight, and I wanted to tell you one of the reasons I picked the title "Wandering the Body" was because all of your work, as I read through each of the pieces, sort of navigates different perspectives or different ages of womanhood. And what I found is that they were bonded by, they were bold, but also they were very fascinatingly feminine. So there was different aspects with Joanna. One of the things that appealed to me was the complexity of language and the double layers, or multiple layers, I should say, of meaning in the work. And Kali has this great spirit, and I know her personally, but there's this vivaciousness, but also very spiritualness that comes through in your work. And then Ananda, with your book, the tenderness and intimacy of the story, you tell the challenges of raising a child and sort of trying to give them both these cultures. And then Natanya, the sweetness and the intimacy and the curiosity in these coming age poems in the Blue Bed, all of them sort of highlight different aspects of womanhood. I think the journey that we see each of the folks go through in these pieces, not necessarily being one person, but just telling those different stories, for me resonates. And I found myself drawn to the whispers that they were sort of telling and giving us. I wanted to ask a question because Kali, you have a great story about it, and I know that you just suffered a loss, and I know it's tied to the title of the book, but you have a great story about how you came up with the title of the book. Did you want to share that with us this evening? Kali, I think you're on
All
mute.
right, thank you so much. It's so funny because trying to find a title for your book is often like a long journey, and for me, it has gone through different. I would say iterations. And so, I was at a moon circle, right? With a bunch of bitches. And so we were like gathered, and there was a book called Altar Making, and it talked about, like using different spaces to make these altars, and like portable altars, and one happened to be a cigar box. And I thought, well, my God, I've been doing that for my whole life because my papa smoked cigars. And I just kind of fell in love with the cedar smell, the wooden smell of those boxes. And as a girl, I would keep all of my sacred, special things, my found objects and the things that meant something to me. And so, thinking about a title for this book, which basically was my thesis of sorts on small altars, just left out, right? This notion of altar making and how we praise and how we revere.
Yeah, and I know that it's even more dear since you suffered a loss of your papa recently. So I want to give condolences, but this is like forever a legacy for him because you get to tell that story every single time, right?
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. And Joanna, I was reading your pieces in the book, and I wanted to sort of put this out to everybody, but I love the complexity of the language in your poems. Not because I was like vocabularily challenged, I should say. I mean, I know I didn't want to have to like seek out a dictionary, but I felt like it was adding. It was. How do I say this? Because it was so complex, it was sort of adding to the story you were trying to tell. If that makes sense. Does that make sense, Joanna? But I'm curious, and I'll ask each of you this: how did the poems, stories that you're telling in Motherland and New Life and in Blue Bed and Small Altars, Kali, how did those all come about?
I'm really sorry to everyone who has to see my finger touch the unmute button, which is a really bad angle for my finger, I just realized. But I think
you have a lovely finger.
Thank you. I appreciate the question, Andrea, and it's so lovely to be here with all of you tonight. So, yeah, I mean, I think like the language in my poetry I'm a dictionary reader actually, and a word collector. So when I'm reading like almost anything, I'm kind of like jotting down the best words that people have shared with, like the best words that I've come across. I get kind of like mentally turned on by language. Like it's just very exciting to me. Um, like yeah, just different language has a really like it has almost a tactile feel to me. I often think about like looking at words like going through an old jewelry box that you found in an amazing closet somewhere. And so I often think about how to build that language into poetry. Um, and and then that kind of like antes up the rest of the diction, I suppose. Um, so yeah, I think that there is a definite attention to that. But I also really am interested in like the way that putting, a $5 million word next to a two cent word kind of like changes the weather in a poem as well.
It put a lot of weight to the idea of the things that you were talking about in terms of birth and sort of the drudgery of being a being I don't want to say being pregnant or giving birth. I mean, it was really interesting. I was fascinated by it, and I didn't want to tear myself and go to the dictionary to find out what that meant because I understood it through the context of the poem. But it was just like um, like I said, it added weight to it. It was like because this complex word was there, it you gave it a different meaning. So I appreciated that. But Natanya, same thing with Blue Bed. I felt like I was under the blanket with you with flashlights. Every poem like was like this secret or this story that was sort of being whispered with your best girlfriend kind of thing. Tell us about Blue Bed.
Yeah, that's very nice that that's how you feel when you read the poems because the book begins certainly with a childlike sensibility, and I do find myself really, especially oddly enough, now that I've retired from my job as an English professor, uh, I go back more and more to my childhood sensibility and to that fresh way of looking at the world, but also thinking about the perplexities of childhood because adulthood is extremely perplexing. I mean, it's very difficult. Um, and so I almost yearn for the more innocent perplexity of childhood. In terms of the sense of intimacy that you're describing, I guess you're referring to the title poem, which is In the Blue Bed, where I am. Well, I'll read it, so I won't say what's in it, but yeah, I do want to feel that I am inviting somebody in, and that I'm speaking directly to somebody. Um, you know, people say I wear my heart on my sleeve. I think this is from. I think of poetry as an offering from me to you.
That's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it. Ananda, I'm one of the programs of the Guild is another program called Palabra Pura, and I'm always fascinated by the the I don't say dichotomy, but the sharing of culture that people like. I don't have to deal with that, but when you're um, from a Latin community, you sort of have to step on both sides of the line, so to speak. And this sort of speaks to that in terms of how you raise your child. Can you say a little bit more about Motherland for us?
Yes. Thank you so much. Yes. I think there's a lot of that, and I think just because my brain got activated by the conversation, I'll link that question to Joanna's answer. Um, yes, I do a lot of with the two cultures, and I moved to the U.S. as an adult, so it's not like I got to grow up here and I'm sharing this similar experience with my son. They are very different because he's growing up here. So I had to do my sharing personally for myself, and then there's my sharing with my son. And they're all different stages of this the cultures coming together. But one thing with language that I do a lot in the book is I have a lot of bilingual poems. And when I heard you both talking about the diction and the high vocabulary, and I loved how you said, oh, like I didn't look them up, I just used the contest. There's a lot of that going on in my book, and I'm very interested in that experience. So there's a couple of things. One is that's very reflective of my experience. I'm always like, there's so many things that I'm like, I don't know what people are talking about. And I feel it either with imagination. Sometimes I look it up, and I actually think that is an enjoyable experience for me. It opens many doors. But if we just look at the words themselves, so if I'm thinking of Joanna's like a high diction, very lovely word that I may not know what it is, I think about the fact that poetry is not just the meaning of the word, right? It's the sound, it's how it looks, it's how similar it is to other words. So I think when you don't understand the meaning of that word, this interesting thing happens where all those things that are happening with every word, they're highlighted with this word that you don't understand. So I really love that effect. And I play with that effect a lot when I put Portuguese in my poems. So it's both matches this content that I'm working with, which is the two cultures, but it also has some play in it that is similar to what the effect that Joanna has in her poem.
I always think of like a part of a poem as being round, so that when you go and you look at a piece and you sort of look around the thing and sort of gather meaning. It's almost like fruit. You sort of have to sort of circle back to it with the pieces. But I want to give you all a chance to sort of read and let our audience know that Ananda and Joanna will be reading first. Joanna, if you want to start, since we're talking about the complexity of your work, we'll give everybody a chance to stew on some of your words, followed by Ananda. So if Joanna, if you could begin by reading.
Sure. Can you all hear me? Okay, lovely. So much to think about after that conversation. And I'm going to start with a poem that I think is actually, there's not very much complex language in this poem, but we'll ease in. Volatiles. As a young woman, my mother lost her hair when the oven erupted. Eyebrows gone, eyelashes singed, her bangs frizzled like la choy. She screamed and bent over the capsular island in the kitchen, kept screaming. Here I still hear her, eruptive, unguarded, cursing her house. The smell of curling iron and burnt peanuts. Cereal on a sheet. Yesterday I asked what she was doing. This and that. What's that? One thing or another. Zapping a patty, not broiling, one less thing. Now her arches ache. And it bothers her, missing out on my change. She feels really, really sorry for herself. I twist my ponytail. I asked. Progress. You are as long as a gerbil, toilet paper tube, cassette tape, harmless bit of pipe. I file you away, my scarlet clue. Half an ear on ice, the nose to powder. I vitamin in the garden underneath the peacock umbrella. And brochures call this power? I was asleep at the table, dreaming of a foil swan, chewing a napkin or a Buddha's hand. I didn't care, anything would do. Free food all over, and more when everything's a measure. Sleeve of crackers, packet of peanut butter, in the conservatory, in the dining room, study, the lobby. Big as a butternut, round as a watermelon. You are so hungry, you swallow the revolver, the wrench, the room key, and me, my whole life. Trimester. Venomous, the arm shows red and assertive. sensate all along. Harder to spear the insula or shore this dark brain, the manifest throbbing, pulses perfect, blood pressure cup. Even these veins are good, succulent, fat, python and reeds pining for a kill. Little flinching. The paper skirt over me stays dry and still. But here, let's have some light, little boy. Our checkup tests fluorescence. The doctor stands and pretends to come through the door once more, urges my uterus under the paper. Piss stopper, jelly wipe, quilted, pink. You've got it pretty bad, he spills. Pills from the keyboard, pills, swivel click, purse bugs, water bugs, hydroxycut, minus a line in my palm. He works his wedding band frown, tells me, no one would be better off without you. Just lie down. Pill prayer, pill prize, the exemplars are so familiar. Mouse down the gulch, hatchery jaw, jam it in, jam it now, deeper, harder, atta girl. Diabetes, insulin, stress fracture, rest, pens, peanuts, bees. He touches his arm. Imagine infected flesh, rashy and hot. Truth or silent dare? Just taste the word, crutch. You are a mom now, he says. Wife, mother, marm, mothball, mom, mutterer. From him, a wrinkled white coat. Give me grander reptiles on this inhospitable island. Garter on a swing tray, diamondback tub. Animal, I don't want to go in the pool, and I won't lose my tongue, and I won't like your table. Give me ether, at least twilight sleep, Tonga room dreams, trek over stream, rain and rum on the half hour. Stethoscope speaks. You're a little too familiar with the terms. Ideation, passive ideation. Well, damn you, diction, thoughts, moths, motile woman, back to your continental shelf. This is not the way things have to be. Your mouth might stay. Your face will freeze. When your eyes cross, you'll regret that Mother Hubbard you down like a saint. You'll never be free again, or muscle in a sack. I have a hand. He shakes it. Elevator, garage, pack, my leave. Do you blight me, little boy? Reprieve this wet channel, our runaway atoll, baby island, sweet terabithia of everything impossible. The antidote is encyclopedic. Isolation can be achieved in many ways, most often through some geographical context. This beach is dark and endless. Not a problem. And I'll read one more poem. It's kind of long. And it looks like a big brick of text on the page with a bunch of dashes between phrases, just so you can kind of envision it. Let me see it. Silver silo on the prairie, phallus tower try, me in the black sedan unsmoked, half this time, half this womb, one of a two-horse hitch, the pairing of parent and child, my father and I, listen to kiss, questions are the age of life, family, that compulsive anthology, how long have I been voluble, always the same, attuned to adequation, pizza buffets, my body is roundly adult, eat it, call me delicious. Diet soda, the best way to cancer. All these years I heard how motherless my father, immaculate conception by dad, tigers and roses and engineers, a slow boy next door, a freezer stocked with hungry man, a plumber, a housewife, a kidnapping, a French name hard on the tongue, a small brick house, a large brick house, a nail through a shoe in a garage, red barn, white barn, yellow checkered, thin crust, hand tossed, my sorry shopping bag wrists, hospital band hidden in bras, red bulb I bought from Ace Hardware. Straight razors spat like Pez. Price tag ankles I've been sneaking for years, slicing slivers of the past. Who was she? What am I? 1/3 French? 1/3 disillusioned, 1/3 unusable, dial tone busy signal ghost. There was a phone on the wall. My father tore it off. The cheaper the plate, the louder the break. Plastic at Pizza Hut, pepperoni at Pizza Hut, good salad bar Pizza Hut, halfway between home and school. Learning the castaways in central Illinois, desolate downtownery of antique and iron, Cambridge, Kewanee, Princeton, a booth, everything blamed on my mother, bathhouse barns, theater barns, scarping gas. My mother and the tent and the mud, my mother and the dogs and the kid. My mother and the money, damn gone. Lady doctor, lady lawyer, lady engineer. The girls he dated, not her. The lives in Michigan, Iowa. Islanded Illinois, ill Illinois. Face greased and mozzarella. Your sickness is hard on your mother. I am not embarrassed she left them. I do not ask, didn't want him, no mischief in the past. In the bathroom, abortion or light through a skin. I used no silverware, retasted the grease. The cows, in afternoon his mother left. I listen. How a man may be untouched, unwanted, alone, adjusted for no one but a daughter. Wretch unto wretch, hearing his heart, this is why never, 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 no children. Flying J, road ranger, loves Philip 66. The cows, God made you. God's purpose, to suffer and endure. The sows, it's so animal and humane, to barf and barf, background hairdryer. It hurt for every woman, she broke for you too. What makes you so special, some delicate flower? How now, brown cow, how now? How now, young sow, cheese breath, curled hair, dry lettuce, cancer crush. Driveway fingerer, Harridan, soling the throat. Halfway, searching the countryside. Don't ask him, 80 miles to go 90. Lion's Den, adult books, Polynesia in the cornfields, silk and sequins. Do not ask about his mother. Raised by wolves, SpaghettiOs from the can, Hershey syrup misogynist. The myth of Medusa-ing the man, Minikinning the father, living a stay-at-home sorriness. Losing the stocks, losing the logic, getting fat on the checkbook. Paying the bills, Pringles. Eating all day, General Hospital. Balancing snack walls and shopping sprees. He wants to drop dead at his desk. Glory days of lab and ashtray. Fun young girls wet. Water skiing Lake Geneva. A key to the Wrigley Mansion. A keychain of handcuffs, Mr. Beef. Routine self-abuse or gravy sandwiches. Fluorescence, a day trip, a flea. The telescope on a bay in Wisconsin. Stars every parent sees. Campouts, a trust fall, a bonfire, a horse. Timeless, lucky, and stupid. One cannot give language, but one can dedicate. Trails in the rearview mirror, the land as flat as my back talk. Prairie school, pleasant daughter, pointy nose. Strutter, speeding ticket, afterthought. Registered, meal planned, I am moving out, moving on, into, trimesters, truck pile up, semi-burn, black car, slow down. Thank you.
That was amazing. That's so beautiful. That's like those poems were amazing. I read them. Yes, thank you so much, everybody. It's so great to be here. Thank you for organizing this. I'm going to read a few poems that I think are very reflective of the collection, but also revolve around the body. I love this wandering body theme. The first three poems I'm going to read, they are sort of related, almost like sisters or versions of each other. And this first one I wrote after going to a party, and we were talking about the letter A, as one does, and and we're talking about how the letter A supposedly came from the head of a cow, like the drawing. And my name has 3 A's, like staring at me. And as I was walking home, I was thinking of those 3 A's. And the area where my family comes in from in Brazil is the Northeast, which the tragedy and the recurring theme is drought. And the symbol of drought is that cow head bone, right? So this is what this came from, and it's called arroyo. Arroyo. They say the first letter of my name evolved from a picture of a carcass, a cabeça de vaca sem as suas costelas expostas like claws or jaws, ancient. My neighbor says not to let my son sleep on my bed, but I do. I know the terror. At night we're haunted by my great-great-great-grandparents, dry on cracked soil, beating in the cold of my feet, na Bahia in the bones they inhabit on my bed. In America, I learned that arroyos are paths carved by the rain, but I already knew. At night, the cracked soil calls for me. as cabezas de vaca of my grapes, calling and calling, I tell them, I don't know you, but I do. The city's spines is split bifurcation, solidified in calcium. In America, they eat the bagasse of oranges and say my name means bliss. I am in love with bone white concrete. The spine of the city sits fleshless and free of scales, flexible bones that can bend and bend and bend and keep bending and keep bending and bending right up until they snap. All right. That is Arroyo. The second poem is very close to that poem, but it's a little bit more readable. You can get access it more. And I think it captures a lot of the themes in the collection, and it's called Line. I inherited from my mother the knobbly joints and square ends of my fingers. From my father, I got the habit of biting my nails. Their shortness, the frayed missing skin, had never bothered me. But now I have a son, and he has begun to bite too. In America, I learned that I can snap a rubber band against my wrist each time my hand reaches up toward the mouth. On the back of my hand, the rubber band disappears into the color of my skin, but when I turn and face the inner side, it is a clear division of my body. The first time I saw a cotton tree, I found it beautiful. The cotton so white in its brown cradle, so soft against the square tips of my fingers. I squeezed the dead flower around it and felt joy from hearing it crackle. As children, we had cups full of sugar cane. We chewed on it and spit out the bagasse. Toothless men ran the knobbly stalks through a machine. The juice trickled into our glasses, and the flat piece that came out on the other side was put through it again until everything was gone. The dry split stalk thrown into a pile, limp like blonde hair. When I first arrived in America, I didn't understand what people meant when they said with an American accent that they were Irish or Italian or French. Now that I understand, I asked my mother for a family tree. She said she had never thought of such things, and she wouldn't know much past her grandmother's first name. So what I have is my memory of the faces of my relatives and my own. When I first arrived in America, all I could see was beauty. The snow, fine like sugar, white like cotton. But now, the beauty, the land, the tired metaphors just make me sad. Before I left for America, I saw an individual in the mirror. But today, I see my father, my mother, my brothers, my son. And a man missing skin from tears on his back, and the man who did it. When I looked this morning, I tugged on my rubber band so hard that it broke. All right. Now, this third poem on the series, it has a lot of this sort of lineage idea in it, and it's a very body poem. And it's called Meat. In the red light of late afternoon, I stand clean and naked in the post-shower fog with a bleary reflection of this body of mine, of yours, and I want to call the conference of my face, summon us from this body of mine, of yours, but I don't know how to sift through the indices of pronouns in our languages. I want you to confess twisting the proteins of your mouths masked in the muscles in my cheeks as I wet my hands wrinkled with condensation and stare at this face of yours, of mine, asking, what have you done to us? What have we done to you? Can I claim you as you did one another? My voice echoes and I get closer to the cleared path, fogging again, cold silver surface still open, my mouth and exhale as we, hiding this meat of me, this soft brazen skin. All right. Good. So I'm going to read now another poem that has a lot of the body and touches on these themes in a different way. And this poem is called, I wrote it after ICE activity became more visible with the last presidency for a while. When they come for us on the 7 train, past the underground tracks, the railroad rises. Our eyes adjust to the sun over Jackson Heights. At the platform, the doors slide open and the winter comes in with the men in their dark uniforms. Silence, except for the please. Stand clear of the closing doors. The weight of their boots sways the car, and I raise my hand towards the pole. But one of the men grabs my wrist, and I feel the cold of his black gloves against the grooves of my tendons. The cold crosses my skin. The cold mixes with my blood. The cold travels in my veins to my fingertips, to my elbow, and my other hand lets go of my son before the cold reaches him too. I say, I'm an American citizen. The soft tissue in my mouth cracks with frost. I say it louder. I'm an American citizen, and the frozen edges of the words scratch as they move through my throat. I shout, I'm an American citizen, and reflected on the men's visor, I see my face. I think of my son if they take me. I think of my son if they don't, as he watches me whisper, I'm an American citizen, while the others are taken by the men of ICE. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Ananda, and thank you, Joanna. I'm like fascinated listening to you both read your pieces, and I so appreciate the perspectives that you have. I want to hear more. There's so much more to be heard about that. But Ananda, you made me think about this, and I sort of touched on it when we were having a conversation before the show. Oh, by the way, before I go on, again, I want to thank Q4 Productions for helping us with the video this evening. And both Ananda Lima and Joanna Novak's books are available at blacklawrencepress.com. The links are in the chat, but you can go to blacklawrencepressweb.com and click on books, and both books are available. Support a small press. But I wanted to say that we were talking about this a little before, but both your books reminded me, your poems rather, reminded me of this. You know, we've heard so much sort of this beating up about the idea of race and identity in terms of race, but I feel like during this time, sort of a racial reckoning, and I use that in air quotes. Do we need to reclaim womanhood? Like, do we need to reclaim our softness, even as they try to take it away through these various masculine type ideals, whether it be related to abortion or through these aggressions against our bodies that we have to sort of deal with every day, kind of thing. I'm just curious because the books sort of embody this sort of female thing, but it also it embraces it. Like it's not just it's identity, for lack of a better word. I mean, but I feel like it's all these versions of identity, if that makes sense. Kelly, especially when we talk about your, because one of the things that I like about your book, and I love small altars because, but I can identify mostly with small altars just because we both come from the same background. I grew up on the West Side, and some of the things that you talk about and in your book are really hit close to home for me. But I feel like that whole womanhood or womanish thing that you sort of grow up with, that you embrace that with your work, but you also honor it. You know what I mean, Kali? And we talked about this a little bit, but you may want to unmute yourself, hon.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you ask a question?
I was just sort of saying, I'm trying to get it to sort of, we're talking about like in these books, the do we need to reclaim our, I say womanhood, but I want to say femininity, you know, and your book does a great job of that because it sort of moves back and forth between the girlish womanness, right, or the womanish that we sort of, you know what I mean. So I'm wondering if that's part of the need with these types of books.
You know, there was a stanza that I wrote, and it was on Facebook. I said, "My grandmother carried a knife. My mother fought me, and here I am with a pen." And I think that that's something that I walk with. And for me, it's really the complexity of what womanhood means, and that it just isn't a soft, fragile thing, you know. And I think that, you know, for me, you know, growing up and watching women, you know, walk the very tightrope of what society said they should be versus who they actually were. And I think throughout the book, I'm always in conversation with that.
You know, I pose the same question to Natanya because I think as you graduate through the book, there's a worldliness that comes about in the poems of the persona, I should say, in the pieces. So I mentioned the idea that you sort of feel like you're sort of being whispered to, but at the same time, I think there was a poem about Paris or something like that, and you sort of see the I don't say graduation, but you see this person sort of more worldly and womanly, if that makes sense. You know what I mean, Natanya?
I know I I definitely know what you mean by more worldly. I think there is a growth in the course of the book, and I think we also grow up a number of times in the course of our lives.
That's a great way to put it.
And these last few years for me have been a period of growing up all over again. And growing up, maybe the last time, means beginning to understand the humanity of your parents, that they aren't just these sort of enormous authority figures who inhabited adult roles and were loving to you and perhaps made mistakes, but they're human beings of flesh and blood, like yourself. You know, I mean, my parents, when I was a child, were much younger than I am now. So in a certain sense, I'm now the parent of my parents. So I do think a great deal about what it means to grow, what it means to develop. It's an ideal for me to be always growing, and always discovering and always developing my capacity for empathy, among other things. Is that related to femininity? I don't know. I always say that I write as a woman and a Jew. Those are the two positions or senses of self from which I write. In Hebrew, the word for compassion, rachamim, comes from the word for womb, rechem. Compassion is intimately linked to having a womb, having a uterus, and being able to mother.
How interesting is that? We did a reading earlier this year with Aviette Kushner, and we had sort of similar conversations. So that whole thing fascinates me. So I would love to have the two of you together and chat more about that, because I'm fascinated by the idea of Hebrew, which is not necessarily the first language, but it's one of the historically classic languages. But anyway, private. Anyway, but I want to give you and Kali a chance to read your pieces. Natanya, I would love for you to start with some works from The Blue Bed.
Okay, thank you. This is the first piece in the book. Journey to Berlin. On the plane, reading Celan, I heard you, mother, your German with the R that rolls closed. When we thrust into strange currents, I felt you in the breathing all around. In the reborn city streets, I see you, fur coat, lipstick, cigarette, laughing, exhaling smoke, back then when artists talked all night near the wall. Tired of palaver, never at home, neither German nor Jew, credulous nor eloquent, you flew back to exile, silent husband, shy child who held books all day and came to you with questions you've never answered. In the Blue Bed. I lay with my friend, her head against mine, her sadness in my ear. Her pulse beat hard. I said what I could. I lay with my man. Our bare bodies said, I attend. Our blood whispered, don't depart from me. I lay sick and troubled, blue quilt to my chin. A violin moaned. Life is a storm, said the bow to the strings. We long and long, we bruise our throats and cut fingers to coax arias from wood. On cobalt fields, at last, I dozed. Lie down, my loves. Hold me. Watch the sails unfurling. Fill. Aboriginal. I went to the ocean. The ocean was churning with filth. I went to the shore was carpeted in bones. I went to the mountain, there were corpses on its peak. I went to the lake and looked down, down, down. At the bottom of the lake was a fish. The fish was God and blue bubbles. I made a long spear from many arrows put together. I impaled God. I put God on a fire made from the broken arrows. As he roasted, he spoke. Here is what you must do, he said. After you eat me, you must walk up the mountain. You must pluck down the skulls. You must go to the ocean. You must take a great net and collect the filth. You must spread it carefully and plant my bones. Then he said, and here is the hardest part, you must go to the shore. You must sit down and wait for the wave. When it comes, you must not budge. You must let the tsunami take you away. If you do this, a new fish will come, but only if you sing my song while the wave drags you under and you are gasping for breath. And here is my song, said the fish. I will tell it to you while you eat me. This is a poem that I wrote for an Australian poet friend of mine. His name is Stuart Cook, and I just want you to see the form of the poem on the page. It's called Song Birds. The male lyrebird, my friend tells me, the superb from Southeast Australia and Tasmania, and the Alberts from Queensland, creates a song to attract a female that could almost be dubbed opera, or is in fact opera, a one-man opera with instrumentation. The Albert tugs on vines and clacks their leaves together, and those vines, attached to a canopy above, make all the trees in the vicinity quiver, undulate, and shake, while he, with his double larynx, keeps a double tempo, percussive on one side, melodic on the other, seduction by polymorphousness. The female, however, is a seasoned critic. Listening with head cocked, she produces a rating based on the history of lyrebird song, accepts or rejects depending on originality of the opera in question. The superb, on the other hand, also a musician and composer with a wider range and a longer song cycle covering a more diverse swath of the continent, using different accents, as it were, and possessing a tail with far more feathers, a truly magnificent, superb lyre of a tail that he throws over his head in a shimmering, glimmering tent, says my friend, throwing his hirsute arms over his bald head so that the brown hairs shimmer in the low lighting of the cafe where we sit on cushions telling stories. The superb is a visual as well as an aural artist and constructs special mounds from leaf litter, dirt, and mulch, like the brush turkey, and stands on those mounds to rise above the surrounding terrain and makes music fit to seduce a queen if she adjudges it fine enough and grants her favors. Sorry. Green shoes. Bought in defiance for turning 55, they look at me from the ends of my legs, saying I'm both old and a child. Buster Brown's, remember? Coming home from the shoe store with mother napping. Buster, I called the left. Brown, I called the right. They talked without motion. Is mother all right? Is she angry? Let's go on a voyage. No, she said to stay here and admire you. No punishment for clean soles on the windowsill. Shall I lick them? Black soles, smell of the shop, pomade of the man who touched my feet, pressed hard my big toe. I heft foot to nose, sniff, put out tongue. Touch the tip. One flick doesn't count. Does it? Buster says no. Brown, yes. Tongue back in mouth, shoe at ledge. I see a cardinal on the branch. Oh, red friend, come inside. Evening. You cross the floor holding a peach. On your foot is a green leather slipper of the sort called babouche. You lift one leg balletically so as not to step on the dog, who is worn out from the walk we all just took, and the many things he wanted to greet or devour, and you are smiling because you know I am in a delicate state, and the green babouche is like a mango skin or a forest, and in the forest are swift foxes, suspended in the air for a moment, through which my heart flies straight to the overstory to rest between green branches. I'll read two more. House of Laurels. First, the house itself, then the house's subdivision, a degree of squalor, or at least disorder, rooms of different sizes cut off from one another with no hallway. I was supposed to come back here and complete something, but which is my room? And who is the landlord? Is he the man I loved then? Still here or long gone? I know that soon he'll die. Who are these other women? The diligent ones, with ribbons and pins. Was I not diligent? Not shining, not pat. But I remember there was an attic, a little cat, my supple shoes she chewed on the day of my test. You should have defended yourself better. You should have risen above your gnawed shoes. I bought them especially in a lavender dress with fluted Grecian folds. Am I here to try again? Yes, if you can move into a room, but it seems all are taken. May I speak to the landlord? He loved me once. And the last poem in the book, Making love to Ben Webster. Ben Webster pulls the blankets away, bares the sheets, laves our flawed shapes with yellow notes, draws us deep, gives the melody and the beat a sudden contrapuntal swerve, swirls around the bed and lifts it up, knowing nothing at all of two white, aging bodies in Chicago, 40 years after his passing, making love to him. Thank you.
Good evening, all. I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to read. And thank you for the to the Guild Complex, where I read when I was a teenager a long time ago. This first poem is called A Poem for Miss Mary Mack, coming down the street like Janie Crawford. We see your brown foot with bells, the heavy garter of melancholy piquant behind your ears and underneath the backwards black dress that catches us. Zigzag ivy, buttons along spine rock like the tasseled nipples of a pinup. It unnerves us how our mothers speak cautionary tales from front gates. We meet long enough to hush your bare legs back into child's play, chanting morning after down to the big house where our mothers hang white sheets. This next one is the title poem from the book, Small Altars. And I just want to say prior to this that, you know, sometimes you don't know what your book is about until you write like a poem that kind of is the glue for it. And this serves as the glue for me. Small altars. We don't begin in tandem. Instead, it is I who stands back with a painter's gaze, surveying a windowed wall with pleated duck curtains, kitchen grease muddying each pane, sun or sky. In this dream, there is no window there, only wall, yellow and indignant. A porcelain Siamese cat grins from atop a shelf dusted in dirt. My mother decides that this is the wall that needs to be cleaned after your death and begins hurriedly, as if stricken by thought, a clean wall, a balm. She has bought yellow gloves and long push brooms, the kind men in overalls use to whitewash a city block after a killing, leaving nothing but slight trail of dust and ornament. She has a paint bucket full of Clorox and joy. I smell its milky clean foaming the rim before she dips the broom. A taste like aluminum gathers inside my mouth when I have to sit at her feet. I know about the lingered packing of the dead. Papa's good new church socks stored in drawers, his pipe with its rooted smoke mantel placed, bottles he wrapped with rubber bands hold themselves in small altars, all of his fury not yet gone. Even your dress, vials of perfume dabbed on my neck, my small wrist sits in waiting. Tell me, grandmother, how to be a woman. I am underneath the kitchen table, listening to folk tale and conjure, staring at the calves of hosed women, still unsure which part to shuck, which part to save. So in my life, I have been a person that straddles borders. And, growing up on the west side and having Oak Park exist one block over has always been a strange sort of two-ness I've always witnessed. And this is called On the Border. And I moved to Oak Park with a Section 8 voucher. And I moved right down the street from where Hemingway was born and his house was. And I thought, my God, isn't this an interesting conversation? So this is called On the Border at Superior and Austin Boulevard. Farther down my tree-lined street, Hemingway was born. The signpost reads with dovetails garlanded oak door. Farther down the other way, a boy is being mourned. Where mothers snatch children's collars, cursing up a storm, I bolt 3 locks and tell my sons, sleep closer to the floor. Farther down my tree-lined street, Hemingway was born. Painted ladies are painted still, bikes desert lawns, cul-de-sacs and barricades and one-ways to make sure. Farther down the other way, a boy is being mourned. Gunshots are firecrackers, blood, street sweat at dawn. Neighbors jog the morning jog, dirt dig, minority poor. Farther down my tree-lined street, Hemingway was born. On this block, boys stand like trees, a gathered cipher of 4. Their black eyes and black skull coats romance the killing floor. Farther down their alleyway, their boy is being mourned. On this block, dreadlocked black boys are herded, cuffed, and warned. Their black eyes and black skull coats romance the killing floor. Farther down my tree-lined street, Hemingway was born. Farther down the other way, a black being mourned. The next poem, I'll read two more. I wanted to read Afterbirth and Being Venus. Afterbirth. Um, as in time and as in a placenta. Afterbirth. You drove placenta from Amherst in a U-Haul, 30-footer flailing behind you, skidding ice like a Tonka. Wrapped in paper, it somersaulted coolers, plastic refuge, ice unfixing biohazard symbol, lifeblood co-piloting. You steered it home before unthaw, penniless on good faith and IOU past ticket takers, tolls, and damages. This cargo, our freight. We wanted to migrate Mississippi, fried chicken in shoe boxes, boys in backseat catching monarchs and counting cows, to plant it under an oak near Hattiesburg, Shaw, Senatobia. My family tended and wailed Rose Hill's lone black cemetery. I wanted to guide you to your kin. In my childhood, I got stung by fire ants, walked barefoot down a Mississippi road named after Big Papa to the mailbox. Dusty country child, I grazed bathwater, slapped hogs on his farm till I blackened 2 whole shades, gathered small pebbles in my palms to bless my city home. We wanted a house the boys could grow in. We wanted a yard wide enough to hold their black bodies against metropolis and ghosts. We walked Woodlawn to Hyde Park, window shopping, open curtains like children playing That's My Car through chain link. We wanted a system of belief. We wanted to pitch a tent on a cliff. We wanted to see mountains and sweep dirt smooth underneath a flat back moon. We wanted separate rooms, a blue house, a little girl, then we did not. I cleaned out our unlived in apartments. Not even mice remained. Stones heavy as blind window sills. A child's scribbled orange crayon, yogurt burst like graffiti on a blank wall, placenta in the freezer's nook. Yet we said nothing. When we make love, we even say things we don't mean. Come back, come back. I think that's my time. Thank you.
Like, don't stop. It's so funny. The Hemingway poem is one of those poems that sort of stands out, not just because of the repetition, but the sort of back and forth. And I always think of how, well, there's a movie called Widows, and then in the movie, there's a passage in the movie where the guy drives from an alley on the west side, and he just keeps going, and it's a straight shot, but he keeps going, and then he ends up in a wealthy neighborhood, which just explains so much about Chicago, how in less than a mile, your whole status could change. Which is, the interesting thing about Austin versus, not versus, but Austin and Oak Park. And there's so many lines like that in the city. I don't want to say line of poverty, because there's a wealth and a legacy that that I'm beholden to because I was born on the West Side. And so my grandmother's house will always be this place of memory where no matter what bad thing happens on that block, it'll always be this good thing, that good thing that they gave to me. But time changes that stuff. So, but the poem that you did before, and I can't remember what the title of it was, it really does encapture the whole book, doesn't it? It's like the story of the book. It's how it came to be almost. So thanks. And, I want to say to all of our writers tonight, that's the beauty of your work, that it's this flower that keeps sort of opening and opening, and giving. And that's the talent that you have as writers. Even as you guys sort of wrap things up, and I was just like leaning in to listen to more, and I wanted to hear more of Natanya's work, and I wanted to hear more of Ananda's work. I thank Delta for not having this event live earlier, and I'm really disappointed because I'm missing out on some good woman conversation. The drinks that we could have had afterwards. So I wanted to give our audience a chance, if they're interested. if you're watching us on YouTube right now, go into the live chat and post any questions that you might have for Kali, Natanya, Ananda, or Joanna. We were talking earlier about what opportunities they might have to see you all in person. So, Ananda, you mentioned that you have a couple readings coming up. If you could share what readings that you have, whether they're virtual or, and I know we were just joking, you doing these readings and you get tired of listening to your own poems, but we don't. So, if you have an event coming up, please share it with us.
Thank you so much. I always try to see like who's in the audience. Let me see if I can figure out a Tetris that, they haven't heard this, but it's just impossible. Yeah, so I'm reading on Sunday. I'm in a Rattlecast podcast live streaming thing.
Rhino poetry.
I know Rattlecast is called.
Oh, Rattlecast.
Yeah. And it's out of LA, but it'll be online. And then I'm going to be reading online. Joanna, how do you say the name of the bookstore?
What?
What is the name of the bookstore where I'm reading? Because how to
Chevalier.
Chevalier. That's it. Chevalier on Wednesday in LA. And then I think I have a couple more coming up after that as well during this couple of weeks.
So now, when I was reading your bio, I was like, she's published a lot in the last 3 years. So, because you mentioned Vivid, and then there was a couple other things. So, what else do you have out besides?
So, I've been writing it all for a long time, but it just all came out at the same time, which is great. So I had Motherland just came out, and all the forthcomings on the bio already fourth game. So they just fourth game. So Amblyopia is a chapbook with a Bull City Press. Tropicalia is a prose chapbook with a newfound. And then I have a Vigil, which is a photography and poetry chapbook that just came out with Get Fresh books.
Mm-hmm. Natanya, I know that you sort of just started because Blue Bed just sort of came out last month or in the last couple months, so which was quite lovely. I'll be sitting with these next to my bed later this evening, but just sort of scouring them more. But can you pronounce the name of the press that published Blue Bed? The Blue Bed, I'm sorry.
Yes, it's called Spite and Dival Press. Yeah.
Now it sounds German.
I think it's Dutch.
Okay.
There's a town that I think in the Bronx called Spite and Dival, and lots of those towns north of the city are Dutch, have Dutch names. Yeah. As long as you have me on for a second, I also want to thank the Chicago painter Megan Williams. Whoops, I'm trying to hold this up so that you can all see it. Megan Williams.
Megan
Williamson.
Who did the
Megan
cover?
Williamson painted this picture, and I'm very lucky to have it for the cover. And if any of you like the cover and are interested in her art, she's at meganwilliamson.com. Just speaking of upcoming readings, I know that I'm going to be in a group reading at KGB Bar in New York on February 3rd. So New Yorkers, please come. And in an off-campus reading at the AWP conference in Philly. I don't know exactly when or where, but hope to see many of you there. Thank you.
We have to hear more of you, so we'll have to find ways to get you out there before the AWP event comes up. We don't get a chance to hear enough of you. And Kali, I know you mentioned that maybe you slowed down a bit, but I know you had a few readings coming up as well. Did you want to mention those? If you could unmute yourself, hon.
I always forget. I'm always ready to talk. I will mention that I'm one of the 2021-2022 artists in residence with the School of the Art Institute at Holman Square. So I'll be doing a bunch of writing workshops and classes there. So that is forthcoming, and there are a few readings that are in the making right now.
Small Altars, and who did the artwork for Small Altars? Because that's a great cover.
Ayana Basuni. She is a artist right now out of New Orleans.
Well, Small Altars is available on bronzevillebooks.com. Again, just click on the link that was in the chat, but you can go to bronzevillebooks.com, click on small books for Small Altars or portfolio for Small Altars, and again, support a small press for the Blue Bed and Small Altars. And then, Joanna, we haven't heard from you in a minute. You started us off. Any last words that you want to let us know about what's going on with you as well? You are also very prolific because Meaningful Life just came out, what, in 2020?
Yeah, Meaningful Work came out from FC2. Yeah, they're kind of close. Meaningful Work came out from FC2 in August, and yeah, I was reading from that book in St. Louis last week at Subterranean Books, which is a really amazing bookstore in St. Louis. If you get the chance to visit, I recommend it. And I'm reading at Knox College, which is my alma mater, this Friday. So I'm very excited about that. That, speaking of meaningful, that will be very meaningful. And then, yeah, like Natanya, I'm reading at AWP as well, an on-site event for FC2, which I'm super excited about. Yeah, just, I mean, in terms of last words, this was just such an, an amazing way to spend it. It's a Tuesday, right? A Tuesday night. So yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Well, I want to thank all of the writers who joined us this evening, Joanna Novak, Ananda Lima, Natanya Rosenfeld, and Khalees Stewart, for just really, really wonderful work. I encourage you to get all of their books, but also do a dive into some of their other work. I know Ananda has some fiction work that's out there, and we mentioned Natanya's critical work as well. You have to check out, if you haven't checked out, Front Porch Arts is doing some great things on the West Side. Go to their website and check them out for more events coming up. I know, Khalid, that you're probably winding down for the year, but certainly I look forward to whatever's happening with you in 2022. Natanya, always great to see you. I would love an opportunity to get the four of us together just to chat. I know I mentioned Abia Kushner, so I would love to have that conversation with you and Natanya, but that's another story. Again, my name is Andrea Change. I am the executive director for the Guild Literary Complex. We've been around since 1989, and we love doing events like this, showcasing new authors and giving them a chance to sort of give you a sample of their work so that you have a chance to see what's out there and what's new. Chicago has a very, very rich literary cultural community, and this is just a small bit of it. The Guild tries to showcase as much of it as we can. If you want more information, check out our event page on FB or our website, again, guildcomplex.org. I want to thank everyone for the time this evening, especially during daylight savings time. We have more nighttime to do more stuff. That's what I say. Anyway, folks, much appreciated. You have a great night. Thank you to our artists. And that's it for the Guild.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.